Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Dee Knutson, a city councilor, and I would like to call our weekly informational to order, and thank you for being with us today. The first thing we'll have will be our city council staff report with Deborah Owen, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. A couple of things today. First, to remind everybody who is attending, we have some handouts that are available here that will be part of the discussion today. And also there is the legislative agenda that the council had adopted for 2007, the state session, and just to have that perhaps available today for open discussion as you begin to look toward your legislative agenda for 2008. And then also there's been a yellow packet of information prepared for you that has to do with the Public Services Committee. Kermit Staggers could not be here today, but he wanted to go ahead and have a brief discussion on that, reporting to the council, and so I prepared a brief presentation for you to kind of sum up what the council has, what the committee has done and worked on, and is ready to submit to the council as a whole. And so with that, I'll just continue. Back in May 7th of this year, the committee began to meet and discuss the idea of campaign finance revision. They held about a dozen meetings, and they invited various guests to attend and to give input to the committee. The committee members consisted of Council Committee Chair Kermit Staggers, or pardon me, Public Services Committee Chair Kermit Staggers, Council Member Dee Knutson, who was Vice Chair and is now Chair of the Council, and then Council Member Pat Costello. A brief overview of our discussion. First, to review the current city ordinance. Second, to talk about the changes in state law that were adopted and enacted in July this year that affect city elections, because we incorporate the state statute by reference in our ordinance. And then lastly, to talk about the Public Service Committee's proposed changes. The current city ordinance, which is actually the law that is still in effect today, is in section 1450, we incorporate the state law by reference, except as we're amended by the city ordinance. And there are some unique things that we have in city law that's different from state, and so just a brief discussion on that. Reporting is triggered by the definition of the term candidate as opposed to state law, and there are monthly reporting required for candidates once you become are deemed a candidate by the definition, and that's a unique thing in city law or city code that triggers the reporting. There's also a notice of intent. So once a person is deemed a candidate by definition, then you must file almost immediately, I think, with the city clerk's office and let the public know of your intent to run. And an item of note is that the campaign contribution limits for those of the state, and at this point in this time, it's $1,000 per individual. And now on to state law changes for 2007. Again, because the city ordinance incorporates state law by reference, state law currently will impact city reporting requirements with this revision. In a very, very brief discussion as to what those mean in broad terms, they repealed Chapter 1225 and enacted Chapter 1227. There was taking a step away, if you will. The general rule now under state law is that in order for municipalities to use the state provisions, you must actually have a formal action to adopt. We have already done that through our ordinance currently. There were also some definitional changes proposed and were adopted, which will clarify reportable contributions and expenditures. Contribution limits that affect local city ordinance in particular regard PACs and political parties. Under state law, no individual can contribute more than $10,000 per calendar year to a PAC or to a political party. That is from an individual to a PAC. There's a distinction there because you'll see something that the committee worked on before, later in this program. And then also they tightened up the reporting of the formation of and the termination of entities seeking to influence campaigns. So if you're beginning a campaign committee, you need to file a statement of organization. If you are terminating a PAC or a committee, you also need to file a statement of termination. They also clarified and placed requirements on entities which engage in express advocacy, which are not affiliated directly with a political committee or a candidate. That is something we have not yet seen on the local level. I imagine we possibly could in 2010. Express advocacy, it happens on the state level already. That is where you have a group of people who do not associate with a candidate but will either advocate for or against that person independently through media. Penalties and enforcement were a large part of the change for state law. Briefly, there is a filing fee of $50 per day for late filers, and then provisions were added to give the Attorney General the tools to investigate campaign records and to prosecute for violations. There also is a civil statute that has the provision of assessing a civil penalty up to $1,000 for a violation. And then on to the Public Services Committee. Again, they began on May 7th of this year. The minutes for these meetings can be found online under City Council, under the Public Services Committee. If you go to siouxfalls.org and then click on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the City Council. You click on that, you'll then go to their website, and you'll see the Public Services Committee. You'll find all of these discussions there and available to the public. I went through just briefly and kind of found some of the objectives. The first meeting has a great deal of the objectives that the committee set out to look at and to consider, but also as they invited guests throughout the time, and there was a number of guests who were invited to give input to the committee. You'll find that there's continuing dynamic as they continue to meet as to things to address, which they tackled. The timely disclosure of campaign activity was unanimous concern amongst the committee. Limiting political PAC action or political action committees was also something that concerned the committee and something that they addressed. Simplifying reporting, not only just with the amount of paperwork, but also with the reworking of the election booklet was another objective they wanted to address. Penalties for noncompliance was part of that discussion, and then to actually have a provision in the ordinance where the city attorney would deal with the enforcement was also important. In addition, they raised the trigger for becoming a candidate to $500. That's significantly different than what is in law now. In part, they did that so that you wouldn't, if you begin raising money for the mayoral race, let's say tomorrow, according to our current ordinance, you would need to file a report every month until 2010. And so I think they're trying to actually simplify the reporting and yet also have more disclosure in that reporting. So instead of becoming a candidate and filing a notice of intent, the proposed change would instead have you file a statement of organization. It's similar to the state's requirement. It's very thorough in providing information as to who is running, who is your treasurer, how can we reach you, how can the media reach you, and then also kept the provision in, though, about requiring a financial statement within 15 days of becoming a candidate. Another change would have been that is significant in terms of helping to simplify reports for those who have to file, is the first financial disclosure statement report would then be due December 31st, the year prior to a municipal election. That would be the very first one. And then also, from that point on, they would be due at every end of the month for January, February, and March. The final pre-election report would be due on the last Friday before the election. This was to simplify and eliminate the 48-hour supplemental reporting requirement. I think in the last election for 2006, we had 24 candidates. We had a number of these 48-hour supplemental reports come in and out of our office, and trying to get those online was a bit of a challenge. And so I think this will actually cover the intent of what that reporting try to achieve with actually one report. It would be a little simpler for the candidates to file. And then also they clarified the 60 days post-election termination reporting date for regular and runoff elections. They required all city elected officials to file an annual report on December 31st by noon. This is similar to a state provision, and what this did and what their intent is here, I believe, is to address that issue of the loophole. So now elected officials will file an annual report. In the committee, we did discuss, and I think it was Councilor Costello who brought it up, we would have the provision if you didn't have any activity in that calendar year, we would simply provide a letter which simply you could just fill in your name and then sign, which would be very easy, and just to say that you attest to the fact that there was no money raised or spent during that calendar year, or if there was money raised, then you have the option of filling out the full report. They also sought to clarify some definitions. I think this is the last page. They required ballot question committees to file with the clerk's office before circulating petitions. This is kind of important. Unlike state law, which we use the provisions of by charter, the state law always has a set in time an election, either the primary or the general, where the city election, we don't have a start date by the uniqueness of using the two laws together. And so having a start date will actually then, we'll know if it's a referendum, it's 20 days. They have to circulate the initiative or the referendum. And if it's an initiative, if it's an initiative, you have 6 months. So it will give us a beginning point in time in the clerk's office to know when they are done. And also we'll be able to have that language and put it up on the web and make it available to everybody that there is an effort out there to circulate and to enact law. Also, the committee did talk about the concern for late filers and wanted to impose a filing fee similar to the state for $50 a day for those who do not file or file late. One of the issues that's probably, everything else up to this point was adopted unanimously by the committee. This was the only issue that was a real struggle for the committee. They worked very hard on trying to find a consensus and brought in a number of people to contribute to the discussion. They had decided, though, I think it was September 17th, by a vote of 2-1, to limit PAC contributions from the PAC to the individual of $1,000 per candidate in a calendar year. What's next? Again, to let you know that Councilor Member Staggers, we guess he couldn't be here today, but he also had a request he wanted to bring before you for this discussion, which would request that the ordinance be presented in 2 different sections or 2 different ordinances. One would have been the portion that was unanimously adopted and agreed to by the committee, and the other would be to sever the PAC limitation out and to present that separately. I think in part his purpose is to expedite getting the ordinance adopted and enacted before the end of the year. But I just leave that for your discussion. And also there's another issue about council preference. Do you want to continue to incorporate by reference the state law, or would you like to include all state law into the city ordinance? And I'm glad Gail's here because Gail and I met on Friday and we discussed the changes that the Public Services Committee had proposed, and both her and Gary, I think it's fair to say, had raised the concern about having to use, both state law and city ordinance. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
That's correct, Deborah. I think it's difficult whether it's campaign finance ordinance or any other ordinance. If you say this is the city ordinance, but state law also applies unless it's been amended by city ordinance, and that's the way the current campaign finance ordinance has been since it was enacted, to my knowledge, and I guess there's movement toward doing that again. And it's difficult for a citizen, I think, to take an ordinance, a set of ordinances, and state law, and have to look at both and figure out where ordinance amends state law and where it doesn't. It's not the easiest thing for a lawyer to do, let alone a layperson. So that was the concern that we spoke to Deborah about last Friday.
And I did provide to you in your yellow packets the provisions of state law that are not currently a part of the ordinance itself, but probably would need to be incorporated. I've actually have worked through a bunch of this beforehand, but I scrapped it because on page 10, I think I decided that it was quite lengthy. But I have great notes, and I think we could probably incorporate it quite simply. It's not a difficult process if the council so chooses to do that. Let's see, and then lastly, or to finish up this slide, before this agenda item can get calendared, we'll need to have, just a reminder that we'll need to have an agenda approval order or agenda approval form signed by 2 council members so we can calendar the ordinance on an upcoming council night meeting. To remind you also that this has 2 readings because it will be an ordinance. I gave you a couple of dates that might work if you would like to move ahead with this ordinance and get this calendared. And then also to remind you that according to state law, once an ordinance is enacted by the council, it takes effect 20 days after publishing in the Argus Leader. So we do have some deadlines ahead of us to think about as you look at this. That's all I have.
Deborah, thank you very much for the presentation and for working so hard with us on our committee. We appreciate, Gail, your input, and also Tamara Jorgensen was there every step of the way, and we appreciate her help also. A question, Councilor Benega.
Deborah, can you tell me the rationale on why we'd want to split this ordinance into two sections?
Well, I can tell you what Councilor Councilor Costello communicated, or pardon me, Councilor Staggers. I'm sure I'll hear about that later. Councilor Staggers communicated to me about he was concerned that there would be a lot of discussion and it might hold up the ordinance itself if we had the PAC provision of limiting it further from state law. And so he just didn't feel like it was going to get done, enacted in time. So
Have we ever done that before?
I've only been here for 2 years, but I don't recall.
Thank you.
Councilor Kavanaugh.
Well, along the same lines, I'm just wondering, since we have a couple of the members here, what was your rationale for the PAC limitation?
I was the no vote, so I will let the, I preferred to limit those to like $5,000 or $10,000, and I was overruled by the other committee members, so I'll let, let's see, Councilor Jamison is not here. Councilor Costello, can you touch that one? You know, as far as, we've spent so much time on PAC discussion, but then at our last meeting, as Deborah said, it was a 2-to-1 vote, and I was the one. I was the no vote on limiting PAC contributions that much for a recommendation to you.
Well, I think did you vote on that back when I was on the committee, or was this after the time when I was on the committee?
I don't know, these weeks are kind of
Yeah,
blurry
I think
sometimes too
I
many.
think this transpired after I was on the committee, but
All right.
from what I recall, some of the logic that we had was that PACs could give unlimited or substantially unlimited contributions to candidates, and individuals were limited, and so it disadvantaged individuals.
Yeah, in fact, Councilor Costello, thank you, and yes, again, I guess the votes on the other side were Councilor Jamison and Councilor Sagers, and thank you. Councilor Kavanaugh.
Do we limit the individual contributions under this new ordinance?
Yes, there would be limited to $1,000.
What is the current limit? I thought it was
That is the
1,000.
current limit.
So there's no change in the individual contribution limits?
Is that correct? No.
That's right.
Have I said that correctly?
Yes, individual contributions to campaign committees is $1,000 per individual.
I think what Councilor Costello said, I think if Councilor Jamison and Councilor Sagers were both here, I think they would answer that exactly like Councilor Costello did. I think that they felt like it was more of a level playing field, period.
I think the other side of the discussion would be to make them unlimited for PACs and unlimited for individuals. And really, that's the crux that we probably face as a council, is whether or not we're going to. I think people by and large agreed that if you're going to limit individuals, you should limit PACs. But the question is whether or not there should be any limits at all.
And am I correct in assuming that there is no limit at this time under state law with regard to PAC contributions to candidates? It's just a limit of individuals to PACs.
Correct. The only limit.
So
to
we're departing
PACs.
from state law on that one.
Correct. And actually, before you asked your question, I saw your hand.
That's okay. Please go on.
I thought you were going to ask the same question I was going to address, so.
I'm
Wait.
sorry I missed you.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Please.
Well, Liz and I have had some discussions, and I think, there's three important components to how candidates or campaigns get money. One is through individuals giving to a PAC or to a candidate. One is from an organization like a PAC to give to an individual or to a ballot question committee. So there's one camp of an individual, and there's an organized group of individuals, and there are wealthy individuals. The only wealthy individuals by the U.S. Supreme Court cannot be, they have unfettered, they can give as much as they want to their own campaign. There are no campaign limits imposed in that one area. I just think that's kind of relevant. I think I put that in a memo to you a long time ago, so.
And Councilor Kavanaugh, probably will be no surprise to you, and I say this really with a smile on my face after all the other reports we've given on this committee, is that actually it just got to, we talked the PAC topic almost to death. I mean, some of us, including me, at first preferred no PAC money and city elections. And anyway, finally we had just talked about this so much. This was really kind of what I would say a compromise among the group. But again, we clearly know that we are merely bringing all this as a recommendation to the rest of you with the idea, of course, as you well know, that you can change whatever you wish. Councilor Costello?
And I would just reiterate that I think most of the changes that were made as far as the forms and the timing and deadlines and things were pretty much unanimous. The only area of significant disagreement was the allowable contributions, and there was quite the range from thinking there should be no limitations on PACs or individuals to significant limitations.
And yet everyone at every committee meeting, staff and councilors realize that it's very easy with an extra piece of paper to draw up another PAC. And so, it just gets to be, kind of an academic discussion at a certain point. But anyway, anyone else have any other questions or comments at where we are so far? Councilor Benega?
My question is that can an individual give money to more than one PAC that then and again is distributed to a candidate?
The answer is yes.
So really, there is no limit.
That is true.
We also discussed the option of eliminating PAC contributions completely, and that was determined to be unconstitutional.
Councilor Litz.
As I watched what was going on here and as I listened to Deborah today, I was hoping we were going to simplify this, but I'm not certain we got that done here. We're heading that way. It seems to me we're talking about a consistency and logic here. If we're going to limit individual contributions and PAC contributions, it seems to me that a wealthy candidate should be limited in how much money he can give to his campaign as well. Either that or we don't have any limits for anything. What we're talking about, what Gerald just brought up there, anybody can start a PAC and then the individual can give 10 grand to this PAC, 10 grand to that PAC, on and on and on. It seems to me that the ways around it are so numerous and it's so full of holes, it's almost farcical to try to put some limits on it and say we're doing it with a straight face. I thought about this a lot. I guess I'm not exactly sure which way I'm going, but I do agree with Dr. Staggers at this point that I would like to separate the two because I would anticipate some controversy on the PAC limits.
Any other questions or comments, just because we do have quite a full agenda yet today? And Councilor Costello?
Regarding the portions of state law that we're not touching, did we decide to incorporate that within our ordinance, or did we decide not to incorporate that?
Yeah, I don't think that we have decided yet. I think that was one of her
So
questions.
is it the administration's attorney's recommendation that it be incorporated into the ordinance?
I think the least confusing way to do it is to pick and choose what state laws you want to apply, to be part of the ordinance itself, and just copy them into the ordinance instead of saying, here's the ordinance and state law applies too. So you would just make a state law an ordinance section, but only those you want, instead of the whole chapter on the state election law.
And on that question, if I recall correctly, I believe that Councilor Staggers would totally agree with that, and I actually do also, and I don't quite remember where Councilor Jameson was on that. So do you want to maybe I'll just think a little bit more about this whole issue and give it to Councilor Kavanaugh?
I guess I'm just asking for some clarification from City Attorney's representative. Are you suggesting that I don't disagree that it would be simpler for everyone to know what's in the ordinance and how it applies to state law and putting state law in there rather than by reference. But you've said something about those portions of state law. Don't we have to put all of it in?
No, you don't. No. The state law says that this is the state law on campaign finance, and a municipality can adopt the state law if it so chooses and even amend it. So they're pretty giving us some broad discretion on whether the state law applies to municipalities or not. You can choose to adopt it if you want to, and you can even amend what you adopt, but it is not your typical situation where state law applies to this municipality as well as whatever ordinances apply.
And if we have no ordinance, then state law applies? Or is there no law?
No, you would have to actively adopt the state law.
But if we had no ordinance whatsoever with regard to campaign finance,
I
what
still
laws
think
would
you'd have
apply?
to move to adopt it, Counselor, because it says it only applies to municipalities if they so choose to have it apply.
Correct. So if a municipality chose not to have anything and did not adopt state law, there would be no campaign, okay.
Right.
Thank you for your questions and your comments and so forth. And again, we can talk among ourselves very soon on this and get it, I think, calendared. I think we want to get that done when we have our next municipal election, as you all know, is April 8th. And so we probably need to proceed. Anyway, at this time, right before we go through the committee reports, I would just like to very quickly introduce you to someone I just met at lunch today. The Sports Authority has been working very hard for months to hire an executive director, and we have two finalists. We're down to two finalists, I should say, and I met the first one today, and maybe he will stand. Mike Sullivan, who actually was born in Sioux Falls, has South Dakota roots, and lived sometimes in Spearfish, sometimes in Sioux Falls, Black Hills University graduate, and anyway, has been working in the sports arena for many years in Florida, but knows that South Dakota is a better state than Florida. And with him is Kevin Lampy. Kevin, will you stand, please, who's given an incredible amount of time to the Sports Authority effort. You know that he is a recently retired school board member and has been acting as our very capable chairperson of the Sports Authority, and you know that I serve on that because the mayor placed me there. So anyway, welcome, Mike, and welcome, Kevin. And I know you're off to tour some more of the city, and we are glad to have you both with us. So, and we will meet the other finalists tomorrow at lunch. So anyway, at least I'm getting lots of good lunches this week. It's really fun to have, we really had a very good discussion with Mike, and in fact, both of the two finalists, the rest of the executive committee members interviewed them by telephone recently, but I was away in Pierre that week. Okay, with that, I'd like to run through, Mayor Munson, I know, had to be at another event right now, and in fact, he is going to meet Mr. Sullivan around 5-ish this evening, so I will run through committee reports. Audit Committee, any report, Councilor Kavanaugh?
The committee will meet Thursday at 4:30. We have two more reports that hopefully the committee will approve and the council will probably see within the coming weeks. Citywide cash handling audit, and the other one is construction contract management audit. So
Thank you, Kevin.
expect those in the coming weeks.
And thank you for your work on that committee. Fiscal Committee, Councilor Costello.
No report.
Okay, Land Use, Councilor Litz. Oh, okay. The Public Services Committee, Councilor Brown.
Our standard meeting is the second Monday of the month, and I'm looking to Kevin Smith. Do we need to meet regarding the odd even watering restrictions? Nothing, so no report.
Okay, all right, thank you, Councilor Brown. Let's see, in open discussion, just a couple quick things I'd like to ask. First of all, I'd like to ask Councilor Litz to, you probably read about by now in the news media today, about our exciting partnership with the school district that was announced at 8:30 this morning at Hawthorne Elementary School. And Councilor Litz and I were there, and that's his district, and I'd like him to tell the world about our fun morning.
Actually, that is my district, and that was actually my school a number of decades ago. It's changed a little bit now, but I used to walk those same streets that those little kids were sitting on this morning, and it was sort of a quickly drawn up public notice, but all the media was there. The mayor was there, Public Works was there, the school board was there, teachers and children were there. But it announced an alliance between the NBA through the local Skyforce franchise and Toyota Motors. Dave Billion was on hand to represent Toyota. But they'd come up with $100,000, and the result was a basketball court and some playground equipment going to be installed at Hawthorne Elementary. And all those little faces were shining and beaming when they unwrapped the packages there, and it was very nice to be there. It was very nice to be able to do that in that part of town, because the playground equipment they have there is pretty old and substandard. It's rusting and needs to come out of there. And so I was just delighted to be there this morning and see all those faces, and it was a beautiful morning. We could overlook the city of Sioux Falls. A lot of people came down there, and I just thought it was one of those things that Sioux Falls does very well from time to time, and that's open up their hearts and their wallets to places that need some improvement on it. That was one of them. So, thanks.
Yeah, it was really fun to have every student from Hawthorne was there, and it'll also be very nice. It obviously fits really well into the mayor's conservation area, and he reminded me the other day that's a council's conservation area too. And anyway, but so will be a really nice addition. And another addition, I think, is because Hawthorne is so close to St. Joseph's Cathedral, that'll be really wonderful playground equipment for those children also. I hope that they will be able to make good use of that. So, and then the other thing that you maybe have already heard today is it was really special that Sioux Falls was chosen by Toyota with this announcement because Sioux Falls was the only basketball development league team that was chosen. Otherwise, they were the big time NBA teams that got substantial money from Toyota for this national kickoff. And so anyway, Sioux Falls was special. And see, we have Rusty Curtains in the audience too. He, of course, was there today with the other arena people, and we always enjoy his great work too. Then a couple other just odds and ends before I have you share your thoughts is just want to tell you all that the museum just last Thursday afternoon opened its new exhibit. And again, I mention that because that's a city-county project, as you all know. And it's a fun exhibit. It's Let's Get Hitched, the Road to Matrimony. I sent an email to someone and said it was so much fun, I almost thought about getting married again, but that's just a joke. And anyway, but you might want to see that exhibit. It was lots of sponsors. It's just nicely done. And I think you'll see a segment of that on Channel 16 in the near future as far as part of a downtown revitalization. Councilor Costello, would you give just a little report on our morning together yesterday at St. Mary's?
Sure. Yeah, yesterday morning, Councilor Knutson and I gave a social justice talk at St. Mary's Church to a group of probably 35, 40 people regarding the various activities of the city and how we participate in social justice. So I think it was well received and went very well. Was there any more you wanted me to ask?
Thank you. I appreciated you helping me with that, so thank you again. And then another topic I'd like to just officially hand off to a committee is for many months, some of us have been chatting informally about possibly the need for an additional video lottery ordinance in our city. And I really appreciate the fact that Councilor Kavanaugh has agreed to sign on to a ordinance proposal that you will be seeing in the near future to discuss limiting video lottery machines in our city based on population, like Aberdeen has been doing for really, I think, about 5 years. And so as chairman of the City Council, I would like to officially send that proposal over to the Land Use Committee. And if Councilor Kavanaugh, would you have anything at this time to add to that? Okay. Thank you again on that. And how about open discussion items from the rest of you? Councilor Costello.
I had a call from a constituent earlier in the week, actually last week, and it was a novel idea about our floodplain concern. And apparently there's been some discussion already amongst the administration and others. But the idea was to build a series of wetlands or detention ponds upstream from Skunk Creek that would result in flood control and ultimately eliminating the need for the levees to be built, rebuilt, and the elimination for the reconstruction of the bridge on 41st Street. So It sounds too good to be true. It sounds like a very efficient and effective way to deal with it. Obviously, there's more to the story. Mark, could you help us out?
I certainly can. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. There's been a great deal of study since probably the mid-'80s on what's the most appropriate way to get the protection that this city needs from the 1% flood. One of the most recent is we've got a large construction project coming across the state that identified the need to mitigate up to 400 acres of wetlands based on what the construction was going to impact. And so one of the first options that was brought to us from this group's attorney was, is there an opportunity along the reaches of the big Skunk Creek to start to create a series of wetlands that would actually also not only address their need to create wetlands with their impacts to their construction project, but to also provide flood control for the city of Sioux Falls. We got on the phone with the Army Corps of Engineers. They actually looked at the area, and really we start looking at the area that is immediately west of La Mesa, out by Unclaimed Freight, that area, and then as you follow the big the Skunk Creek up those reaches, that's really the area. A couple of key points is that as we started to talk to the Army Corps of Engineers, they don't recognize wetland mitigation as a flood control measure. So right then, at that point, that's a key part of, for the city at least, to probably take a step back and say if this isn't going to count as a credit to our flood control effort, they may have to go along their own point there to actually establish the impacts, to mitigate their impacts. But another idea that came was, okay, if they were able to, along Skunk Creek, actually build a levee system, and then when there's a peak flood that comes through, that the levee, the water could actually go over this levee along the wetland. If that would shave the peak off to actually take water over that levee into this wetland created area and not send it through the city. That is not really a tested flood control measure, so the Army Corps of Engineers dismissed it. So that was, again, it's been looked at. They've actually drafted a report. One of the things that the Army Corps of Engineers has a significant stake in is that since they are participating in 75% of the funding for this, they've been, from what I've been aware of through this last request, but even prior, they've been very receptive to alternate ideas because they are participating in 75% of the funding. So there's also a host of other things that we can talk about with that, but there is one of the things now I think that the City of Sioux Falls really has the benefit is that with our project, the project is designed with the exception of that bridge just upstream of Skunk Creek and the Big Sioux River. And so one of the things we, I think, have a benefit of, since the majority of the land has been bought for the widening of the levees, we've got an opportunity. We have 2 more parcels of land to close on. Outside of that, then the land is ready to receive the levee raising. And we can actually just really go and say, our project's designed. FEMA is now motivated to file their maps. Can you provide the gap of funding so we can get this project done to not have this confusion with the floodplain? Does that help?
It does. And Mark, can you maybe explain the dynamics between FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers? Obviously, we've got FEMA that's created the floodplain map and the Corps that's responsible for the levees.
Mm-hmm. Well, they are 2 federal agencies. FEMA is, as you know, they are in charge of keeping the floodplain maps as up to date as possible. On the other side, the Corps of Engineers is in charge of levee systems. And so the 2, as we've tried in the past to get them to collaborate and really work together so there's no duplication in either effort, or at least one set and one platform of data out there that we can share with our citizens. But that doesn't always happen. And so the two are federal agencies, and outside of that, I don't know what else I could share with that.
The constituent that I had talked to also had indicated that that these detention ponds and wetlands were accepted as flood control. Is that was that they may just be wrong, but is that because maybe FEMA accepted it and not the Corps, or vice versa, or do you understand where that confusion comes in?
Yeah, I would. It was dismissed because it wasn't an accepted flood control measure, and so once that's done, we go away from that solution.
And the Corps essentially dismissed it.
Right.
Would you come to the mic, Tom? Would you come to the microphone, please? And would you introduce yourself also?
Tom Birkland and staff in city engineering. It was FEMA that said we will not accept a peak shaving system levy as a flood control measure. And so the FEMA told the Corps of Engineers that if you design that, we would not accept it. The Corps of Engineers was looking into the design. They had a lot of concerns with it, but they were looking at that design until the directive came down from FEMA that the risks of the operation and maintenance of that type of system are just too great to count that to protect the people downstream from a catastrophic flood.
Final question, and then Mark, is there any more follow-up, or from the city standpoint, is this any way, an avenue that we can look at or pursue, or is this a non-starter so far, or at this point for the city? Are there any options out there?
Well, I think, at least from my perspective, with the Corps providing 75% of the funding, and then at the end of the design and construction, they have to certify. We really have to let them take the lead on our levee system and flood control measures through the city. And so with that, the other piece of information, too, is that part of our city is really where our deep gravel reserves are, and to take that out of our area with all the development and construction that is happening in our area, and to not get the full useful life out of those gravel reserves, that would be another hardship in a different area of our growth and business development. Vernon?
I just need some clarification, Mark. So what is our strategic plan here? Is it first to appeal the FEMA maps? Is it then to appeal for more money from the Army Corps of Engineers? And finally, is the last plan to pay for this ourselves? What are the steps that we as a city are going to take so it's very clear to taxpayers what we're doing on this?
I would say those are our steps. We're, right now, as you know, October 15th started our 30-day comment period. We intend on giving them our comments back that we've heard, but also from a staff perspective. Our next piece is also to work with the Omaha office and their colonel with the Army Corps of Engineers. Again, our strength is the fact that this project is really close to being designed. That last element of that bridge, that lock system that we need to get designed, the Corps of Engineers knows that. We'll be in coordination with them, and then we will go as high as they say to get to substantiate our position to get this funded.
And that is how much?
I would expect right now it's in that $18 to $20 million project range, and that's in addition to our commitments that we have ahead of us, which is those two property purchases and the 41st Street Bridge that's in the CIP.
Clarify for me, the $18 million is what it costs to do the total project? That's not the city share?
No, that's what we need to finish the project.
That's what the city
That's
needs.
from the Corps of Engineers funding.
That's the core funding.
Right.
And our share?
Our share of total is 12.5%, and the state is 12.5%, and then Army Corps of Engineers is 75%. One of the other key elements is that we've talked about if there was additional storage created upstream, would that necessitate not redoing the 41st Street Bridge? And if any of you have drove across that recently, the deck for certain is near its end of its useful life. With this project, we will be raising that bridge to match the levee elevations coming in and out of it. So there's clear span for the flood way to go underneath it. But that's, even though it's a part of our project, it's also comes at a good timing on both sides from a traffic standpoint, but also a flood control that it's used up its useful life.
Anything else? Anything else? Councilor Litz.
Mark, I had evoked several questions. One of them was, we've been talking a little bit about the greenway, finishing the greenway system in the city of Sioux Falls. Obviously, the greenway falls along the path of the river in most cases, in a lot of cases, and other stuff. Curious, is there any way to integrate our finishing the greenway with improving the levees? Are there spots where the two overlap?
Well, I'd say there's a pretty distinct ending point, at least from Marion Road, where the levees end on the west side of our city, and then as you move up through the greenways, as you go north and then west and then back to the east, those areas, as there's going to be a lot of development all the way up through Green Hills, and as we work with developers on those, that land's being dedicated, set aside, and also I know the planning department works intently to actually secure areas for the bike trails and parks along there. So,
another thing, we're in Skunk Creek, and I was surprised at the extent that the map had grown for flooding rates along Skunk Creek, like most of us were. The valley, as you go out towards Hartford, there's quite a valley out there, and you can follow it along there. You go up on the hillside, I don't know, maybe it's got an elevation of 125 feet. There's quite a few places that are tantalizing in which to store water. Now, I guess my question is, as we wait for the Corps, FEMA wants this, and it does all this thing, at what point would it maybe be feasible for the city of Sioux Falls to start looking at doing something that would work for ourselves and dealing with those people at the same time? And what I'm talking about is maybe buying some of that land here. Not only would we get to be able to design possibly, I don't know if you're listening to Tom a little bit, I realize it's a lot more complicated to do it than it is to say it, but we could have possibly some flood control. We could also have some acres for the detention pond, and also some acres for mitigation. I'm thinking about a notable place down there on the tracks on 69th Street, and there's some few other places around town that we're simply going to have to mitigate if we're going to make our overpasses and make this city work. I'm sure there's been some thought along that.
well, there has, and I think if you're considering as we move out of the city up the upper reaches, if we start to look at constructing a dam or trying to permit a dam in this day and age, that's going to be a extremely uphill battle. Plus all the inundated area that we would inundate behind it. One of the things we're going to do as staff is actually really formulate an approach to take to the mayor that will see where those key steps are here. And so there's obviously, this is a key discussion that's inside City Hall that you will be a part of as we go forward.
Councilor Costello?
Along that lines, wasn't there at one time a plan and the engineering done to construct a dam on Skunk Creek somewhere upstream? I mean, this maybe goes back 10, 20 years.
No, the dam that we've talked about, at least in recent time, that Tom's had a great deal of time with, is an inflatable dam that would actually, by the flow coming down the rivers, that it would actually actuate and raise up. Yeah. But one of the things that's occurred is that that style of dam, they don't make larger than 17 feet. Ours is in that 22-foot range. And so that's why we've had to go away and actually go to a lock system. And so at one time, that dam was actually
That's
designed.
just to prevent the backflow to go north of where
That's
the
right.
Y comes in.
That's right.
The people that I were talking to had indicated that there was some design and engineering done on a dam on Skunk Creek upstream of Sioux Falls. So I don't know if that's true or not. But
I'm not aware.
If not, okay. Two other quick questions for you. You mentioned the 41st Street Bridge. Provided there was some other solution, which I have no idea what it would be, but I got to believe that replacing the deck on the bridge would be substantially cheaper than trying to redo that entire bridge.
Probably right. We've also got some, with any metal bridge that's been out in the elements for that long, we've got some corrosion issues that we would be taking care of. And so from our perspective, it's the deck, but also the substructure needs work. And for us to get another 50 years of life, it's the time to actually go in and do the right fix.
And just as a point of clarification on Vernon's comments, so what the city has upcoming in costs on this whole project is the 12.5% of the levee construction itself, the reconstruction of the 41st Street Bridge, and the acquisition of the 2 parcels left to be done.
I think, at least from my understanding, and Tom can add to this, when they started the project, they said let's identify that the partnership would be 75% core, 12.5% city, 12.5% state. And as we've gone through, we reconcile those numbers on what's been spent on all 3 sides. And so it's not to say that when a levee project is let, we have to contribute 12.5. Tom, do you want to add to that?
With the whole project, the city is responsible for all land acquisition costs, all costs of bridges, other structures, and the Corps of Engineers is responsible for the levee improvements, the structure, the culverts through the levee, things like that. So in the end, we may have more than 12.5% costs in there with some of the bridges and things like that, but we have to pay the cost of the bridges of the land acquisition. That and it is considered part of that 12.5%.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I think I got confused on that. So you're saying that, the city goes out and does the land acquisitions and we pay for the bridges, but that's our kind of equity, so to speak, in the project, and then the Corps does their stuff, and then when it's all totaled out, we pay 12.5%, and the state pays 12.5%, and the Corps pays 75%?
We have to pay at least that 12.5%, but in the end, say we spent actually 13% on land acquisition, bridges, and that would get credit for 12.5. Okay. Whatever it costs, we pay those, and the Corps does not pay anything in that, but it is credited towards our share.
Okay.
Councilor Brown.
Mark, so I'm going to back up a little bit. So will we see a comprehensive plan? The clock is ticking for taxpayers who are going to see possibly, at a minimum, $800 increases in flood insurance costs. Will we? You mentioned you're working on a plan with the mayor. When will that plan be presented? When will the council see that plan? When will the taxpayers be able to see how the city is aggressively pursuing this?
We'll be able to bring you that schedule back. Our kickoff meeting is being scheduled, and not only the schedule, but our approach or multiple approaches would be a part of that. And so then we'll, once it's ready to be released, I don't want to speculate the time frame because we are talking about a significant project, finding funding for approximately an additional $20 million via additional effort support from the Corps or other means. And so I would just predict that it would certainly be within the next quarter.
Councilor Costello.
Is there any hope that taxpayers that are affected by this will not be have to incur this additional cost for flood insurance, or is that just do we need to accept that and then also figure out what our plan is going to be to minimize the time frame?
I would expect at this point we have to accept that. Obviously our comment back to FEMA will be is that as in before, there's difference in data. We've got a flood control project that's designed and stages of construction. As you drive out there now, the levees have been raised up to 49th Street. The contract now to do from 49th Street to 41st Street's been let, and so you'll see that work begin next year. And so I think one of our strengths is, again, and as that memo read that I sent you last Friday, there is a bill that's in place that may, we hope, get some traction that actually does delay this until FEMA can produce what we expect is accurate maps. And so at this point, there are, I don't want to commit that the FEMA is going to back off, but they have in the past. But this time, I think with their mandate to fulfill their Map Modernization Act, that would be what I would expect at this point.
Councilor Kavanaugh.
So, Mark, if we've got portions already complete, contracts let for other portions, where is the $18 million? What does that amount to?
Well,
What's left?
Well, we're only, once we get federal funds appropriated, then those projects get let. And so this next one, which is between 49th Street and 41st Street on the East Bank, Tom and I just talked about that today. That's under a $2 million project. And so then the next step will be to do the other side, but those funds have not been appropriated yet. And then the next piece will be to go from 41st Street all the way around Meadows on the River, tie back at Marion Road, and then bring it back on the north side. And based on which ones we do, it'll be a sequencing issue. And then we'll also do the one from 41st Street on the east side and go straight up to north of the confluence. And then the last levee raising that we have to do is part of the diversion channel up north. And that's got minimal raising, but that's also a project. And so incrementally, as these projects of, that size are let, you start to add up those reaches, that's where you get your $18 million.
So the bulk of the projects have yet to be completed or let.
That's fair. That's exactly right. But the strength is that they've been designed, and so if we can get them to refocus on Sioux Falls and fund them to clear up this timing confusion that to meet FEMA's requirements, but also to follow through with the Army Corps of Engineers, we're motivated to do that.
Councilor Brown.
So given that, what's the best case scenario that the work could be complete?
I think reasonably, just with the size of construction, we're probably looking at somewhere between, at the current funding level that the Corps of Engineers is 8 years, and our motivation is obviously to make that much shorter.
And then at 8 years, so taxpayers today should know that they should expect that if they're in that flood zone, they're going to have that insurance for the next minimum of 8 years. But what about, can we demand that FEMA comes back and redoes its map once those levees are done, or do they just do those, are they calendared to a certain amount of time?
No, they have a process that once they, even if you are personally in the floodplain, if you're developing a building and you raise that elevation above their flood elevation, you can submit the appropriate documentation, whether it's, they call it LOMARS, letter of map revision, or there's nomenclatures that go into their process that then they can go into their map and actually exclude you. And that's what you'll see is that there's been several projects along 41st Street that as buildings have come in for redevelopment, they've been asked to be raised, they've raised, and so that's why you see some of these buildings that are actually, out of the ground more than what their neighbor is, and that's just because they've developed in the past few years, and in some of those areas the maps were very consistent, and that's why they're outside.
Councilor Costello.
Is there any opportunity for the city to pre-fund the levee construction with reimbursement to come at a later time from the Corps?
We haven't asked that question, but our expectation is that it will be difficult to be reimbursed.
I just wanted to tell you that you might be interested in reading that. It's kind of timely, I guess, in the front page of USA Today this morning. There's an article about the Louisiana situation with FEMA and the obstacles they are facing also. And I just kind of found it timely. And then the other thing is I was obviously thinking about this topic a lot over the weekend like all of you were. And anyway, I looked in my files in my little office at home, and I found in my flood control file, I found a memo and a Skunk Creek map and a levee design, piece of paper here from May 2002, which reminded me that I had just become a city councilor then. I was clearly a rookie then, and we were discussing all this at one of my very first council meetings. So Anyway, anything else on this topic for now?
Chair, if I could add, just
Yes.
if there is interest, Chair, we can certainly work with Deborah, and Public Works is certainly willing to provide you a tour of the levee system from Phase 1 all the way through Phase 3. And so if there's interest, let us know, and we'll coordinate that.
Okay, and Public Services Chair can work on that with us too, okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Tom, also for being here too. Okay, I just want to remind everyone here and the world listening too that November 3rd, coming up this coming Saturday, is our free electronic recycling day that the city is sponsoring, and again, that's from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for all 5 counties: McCook, Minnehaha, Lake, Lincoln, and Turner County, up at Millennium Recycling on East 50th Street North. And again, I'd like to encourage everyone to participate in that electronics recycling free project. And with that, I thank you for your patience, for those of you who are waiting to give reports to us. And we'd like to now move to the arena update report from our hardworking Director of Planning, Mike Cooper. Thanks for your patience with us today, Mike.
Good afternoon. Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. I, along with Gene Rodenhorst, the Finance Director, are the staff liaisons with SMG, who is our on-site manager of the arena facility. As you know, each year the City Council adopts a 5-year capital improvements program, which addresses the needs of various city departments, including our facilities. And last year, as we discussed what the future request would be from SMG regarding the arena, we felt it was time to step back and take a bigger look at the arena building itself, and also knowing that there's been a lot of discussion about what the future of the arena is going to be. Is it going to change? Is it going to be converted to some other use? But in the meantime, what type of improvements might we have to look at funding with that building facility? So with your permission, we went into an RFP process, and we did select Miller Sellers Haro to enter into an agreement to look at a 7-year plan of proposed, I'll emphasize the word proposed, improvements at the current arena building. Jim Haro is here today to give you a summary of his findings with his team. And I'll just quickly tell you that we did discuss this last week at the Arena Convention and Entertainment Board meeting, and they did accept the report without any major discussions. And on page, as Jim is coming up here to present his findings, I'll just tell you quickly that if you looked at the summary on page 37, there are 2 projects that you have discussed in the past. One of those is that in 2011, we do have in the current 5-year CIP a project identified to do some chiller replacements as part of the HVAC upgrades, and that's currently scheduled in 2011. The second project that has been discussed is the proposal to upgrade the locker rooms next year, and that has not been officially approved by the City Council, but Kevin left today with the Sports Authority has been promoting that idea of upgrading those locker rooms. So those are the 2 projects among the entire list that we have discussed, and I believe all the others are proposed at this time. We believe that this is a starting point for further discussions. We are not asking you to approve this plan today, but we are expecting that there'll be further questions, further review of what's been proposed, along with discussions about what's going to happen to the arena in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim Haro, and he can give you his summary of his findings.
Madam Chair, if I could, Mike,
Yes.
you indicated that the HVA system, that's in the CIP. What about the locker rooms? It says projected completion 2008. That's not in our CIP, though, is it?
That's correct. At this point, it's a recommendation
Okay.
to put it in for next year.
Does the committee have a recommendation as to where the money would come from?
That would come from, I believe the recommendation is going to be coming from the Sports Authority on the funding of that. And I believe there's a proposal going to be coming forward for a cost sharing of 50% by the Sports Authority and 50% by the city through the sales tax fund. I believe that's going to be the proposal. Does that sound right or not, as the Sports Authority representative?
I might be behind a tiny bit on that.
Okay.
I thought that the most recent discussions I had participated in, because it is a city-owned building, I thought there was great support among some of us to see if we could get the other city councilors to support the entire renovation of the arena to meet the requirements for the Summit League event in March 2009.
Okay.
So I may be behind.
Well, I may be speaking out of place too, but, so I would say, to answer your question over again, is that the proposed funding for the locker room is still to be determined. How's that sound for a backup answer?
Councilor Costello?
Mike, why would the proposed funding come from the entertainment tax versus the CIP?
Yeah, the entertainment tax is specifically identified for the convention center and the pavilion. That's my understanding, that that's the only two facilities that we can use that for.
Okay, maybe I misspoke. I thought you said that you were originally on the assumption that it was 50% from the Sports Authority and 50% from the entertainment tax.
No, I thought I said sales tax.
Okay, I'm sorry, sales
Yes,
tax.
yes.
You're probably right.
Well, I'm never always right, but, so as far as the 50/50, that might have been a previous proposal, but in any event, whatever portion the city would pay for the locker room would potentially come from the sales tax. How's that sound?
Yes,
Okay.
and Mike, and again, obviously, the city council will ultimately make that decision, and so, you're not wrong either. Jim Herreau, would you come forward, please, and welcome, and thank you, Mike, for your hard work for our city.
Oh, thank you. I am Jim Herreau of Miller Sellers Herreau Architects. Our firm, along with West Plains Engineering and Rise Structural Engineering, was retained to develop this report. On the positive side, we found the building structurally sound, which is pretty good for a 45-year-old building. On the negative side, the arena has many structural, functional deficiencies. Repair and improvements should and obviously be made to continue the day-to-day operations of the arena for the next 7 years. Some functional deficiencies cannot be fixed because of the building design. Our report indicates the priorities and the expected costs for each improvement, and we understand the city will evaluate each of those improvements and reprioritize as needed relative to other funding. The full report is here. What I'd like to do is give a very brief summary of each of the areas of the report that is covered and our recommendations. Right now, the arena has less than half of the required storage and support space for the functions that it houses. It's severely under-storaged, and there's nothing that can be done about it. So we're not recommending anything be done about it. The design of the building does not allow good sight lines for the majority of seats for hockey and indoor football, as most of you are probably aware. This cannot be improved either. The building is designed with 4 concession areas, 2 on the upper and lower of each side. This requires that concessions have to be open for all the events, regardless of how many people are at any of the events. It would be obviously much better if concessions were in 1 or 2 locations so that staffing could be minimized and maximized as needed. This cannot be improved either. Cooking is not allowed at the concession stands, and so certain types of food are limited for the arena. This cannot be improved because of code conditions. The curved roof of the arena causes ice and snow to slide down onto the flat roof areas, causing leaks on the flat roof at the connections and the entries. We recommend that this roof repair be a high priority. The building structure makes it difficult and costly to hang equipment and lights for special events and concerts safely. We're recommending renovating the structure to allow a fall suppression system over the concert stage area for the safety of the workers installing that equipment. All the scoreboards have continuing maintenance issues. They are an old technology and have no video replay capability, advertising capability, or information display like up-to-the-minute statistics. We are recommending installation of a new video display board to increase fan interest and to increase revenue from advertising. The wood seats on the upper level are original to the building. They are no longer manufactured, and it is not possible to obtain replacement parts for maintenance of the damaged seats. We had some seats in storage that we've been scavenging replacement parts from. Those are now limited. We are recommending maintaining the existing wooden seats with parts from the seats in the last rows and scavenge the last rows as much as you can to keep those seats operational for the next 7 years. Retractable seating on the main level is elevated to the level of the basketball courts with a plywood subfloor that is wearing poorly and causing problems with the operations of the pull-out sections. We are recommending a new, more durable subfloor to extend the life of that retractable seating for the next 7 years. The old wood retractable bleachers on the south upper level are not flush with the wall when they're fully extended. And there's a gap that things and people can fall into. It poses a safety hazard for public use. We recommend replacement of those seats with new plastic shell seats per current code. Relocating the arena management team to a space within the arena to allow separate management spaces for the arena and convention center staff would lose storage space in an arena that badly needs storage space. If this needs to be done, we recommend the addition be built to the northwest entry to house the new arena offices as needed, or if needed. The existing team locker rooms and team toilet showers are too small and do not comply with accessibility requirements. 2 locker rooms on each end, on both ends, share the same toilet, share the same shower facility. You can walk from one locker room through the showers into the other locker room. Generally not good when you have 2 opposite teams. We recommend that the renovation of all 4 locker rooms comply with the requirements for the Summit League for tournament play, and also allow accessibility requirements, and in the same time improve the ventilation, which is non-existent to the locker rooms. Some of the questions that you were asking Mike earlier was a discussion of what part should the locker rooms, why should the locker rooms be supported by the city and some by the Development Foundation? It was talked about that the arena is deficient in accessibility. The locker rooms are not accessible right now. They should be accessible. According to ADA, they need to be accessible. That's the part that I think is a city requirement. The arena does not have a media room. It has only one official's dressing room, and that is not accessible. We recommend renovation of a storage area to allow construction of a media room and a second accessible officials' room. A lot of the officials are now coming in split crews with some male and some female counterparts, and one officials' room is difficult to deal with. The VIP boxes that are located on both ends of the court, rink, or field could be could increase income and provide added fan interest with the addition of flat panel screens. That would give some replay if the new digital scoreboard were a part of that process. We recommend installation of flat panel TVs in each of the VIP areas only if those costs can be justified by increased revenue and if the scoreboard, the main digital board, is done so that cameras are available so you can see it from a different angle than the end angle. Most of the existing plumbing, both above and below the floor, is galvanized piping, original to the building. Much of that piping is now corroded and obstructed. Some copper piping has been installed with previous improvements and in spot repairs. The restroom water closets are not accessible at an accessible height and are not adequately attached to the floor and wall support and flex in other rooms when a heavy load is applied on one water closet, the other water closet tips. It's not meant to be a joyride. We recommend replacement of all the old galvanized piping and new water closet carriers properly supported to meet accessible requirements. The arena ventilation system does not allow adequate exhaust of gases from auto and truck shows. We recommend additional equipment be provided to provide adequate ventilation and temperature control for the arena. This could also be used for concessions and back of the house area to provide better ventilation. The existing chillers are scheduled for replacement in the CIP budget for 2011. We recommend those chillers be replaced at that time. The electrical system, good news, is sized adequately. A new entertainment-style lighting system with dimming and dousing and DMX controls would be nice and would be recommended. If the video display boards and TVs are added, additional camera locations and cable locations would also be required. That's all part of the enhanced entertainment package if the arena is going to continue to function as it currently does. So we would recommend new lighting system if that were to continue as its current function dictates. The sound system for the arena is inadequate and not flexible and does not provide good sound to all seats and particularly to the playing surface so the players can hear the sound system. We recommend replacement of the system with a new digital sound processing system. If all these recommendations and improvements were done, the cost would be over $7 million in today's costs. The arena will continue to function in its current capacity for the next 7 years, even if planning is started for a new event center, and then right now. It's just going to take that amount of time to make something happen. Many of the basic infrastructure improvements definitely need to be replaced in order to allow the arena to continue functioning over the next 7 years and beyond. Because of the many functional deficiencies of the arena, we do recommend that planning be started for a new event center soon. If a new event center is built, the arena can still serve the city well as an addition to the convention center space. The convention center needs additional space. There was an earlier study showing how the arena could function with that convention center. All recommendations for improvements to the arena must be considered based on the overall plan for our community's entertainment needs. The recommended improvements may be phased or prioritized differently than we have suggested, and it's your job to look at that priority based on the larger picture and what funding is available and what new additions to the community may come in the near future. Be happy to take any questions.
Councilor Costello.
You mentioned that, well, let me just ask you, of the over $7 million in proposed improvements, how much of that would be useful in a convention setting? How much of that would we make otherwise? Because it seems to me a lot of these improvements would not be applicable in a convention center setting.
The infrastructure for the piping is going to need to be done. The underground galvanized piping is going to need to be replaced. The chiller system is probably going to need to be replaced. Over the next 7 years, I see the locker room improvements being used significantly as well. Everything else is wishes. And if it's going to continue to be used as a multicultural event center, they probably should be done. If it's going to be used as something else, I wouldn't spend your money looking at a lot of those things being done. I think you'd only improve what is absolutely necessary to the infrastructure to make sure it's going to continue to be used as it turns into something else.
Councilor Litz.
Thanks for your hard work. I've been sort of watching this thing evolve over a period of time, and I agree with a lot of your things there. Yeah, there is one thing, though, the total is $7 million for all these wish lists and stuff, but I look at the arena, and I look at the future of the building, and even if we do build an event center, I would hope that the city would keep this, as a venue. But to make this place relevant, and to keep it a useful place, I guess my proposal would be add another $500,000 onto that and build an ancillary building on the northwest part of the arena of about 3,000 or 3,500 square foot for storage and for arena offices. There's no place for storage on that building. There's no place for offices. Everything's kind of jumbled up in here, and I just think to keep that building relevant over a period of years, that we're going to honestly have to look at that. Nobody likes to add another $500,000 onto something, but it's just going to be a reality if we're going to keep that building and keep it occupied. It wasn't really a question. It's just I surmise what.
I won't answer it then.
Thank you, Councilor Litz. Councilor Benega.
Jim, if the $7 million is added to the existing structure, what kind of life expectancy would we expect from that investment?
I think the arena could continue to function in its same capacity probably for the next 25 years. It will continue to have poor sight lines and be short of storage.
When you say poor sight lines, are you referring to the basketball floor and the hockey floor being below the deck level?
Yeah, the sight line problem really comes from the bang boards on the football and hockey events. The arena is really built for basketball sight line, and it does quite well for that. Once you start putting up those bang boards, you lose all the action on your side of the seating area.
I just wanted to also say earlier regarding my comment on the need for is what the arena would need to, how much it would need to be renovated to meet the Summit League requirements is about $300,000 worth. It's not quite that much, but I just want you to have that number to kind of be thinking about a little bit in your mind, and you can decide later if you what you want to do about that. And again, I myself, again, as an executive member of Sports Authority, but also a very serious city councilor, I am hoping to go back to Councilor Kavanaugh's question earlier today, I am hoping that the council will seriously consider amending the CIP early in 2008 for, to cover that, and, you know, I'll either win that one or lose that one, and I'll move on regardless. So I just want to give you that information. And even though I say Summit League is obviously getting our lockers up to speed and so forth, we're talking about doing very minimal things like, you know, not adding new walls, just dismountable walls and you know, office space that could be used for office and media, but also would be used for obviously all of our current sports teams and any other groups that play in the arena. It would be used for way more than the Summit League basketball tournament for as long as need be, and I am still hopeful we will have a new event center announced before I'm on off the city council. Councilor Costello.
I had a question for Mike. The 50-50 split you were talking about, was that in reference to the $300,000 of improvements for the Summit League, or is that for the $7 million that we need for the arena?
Well, obviously I misspoke on the 50-50 split, but it was in reference to the locker room project.
The $300,000.
Yes.
And about half that amount, I believe, is required by ADA. And I don't think Mike misspoke because, I mean, different people have different thoughts on that, so I don't believe he did misspeak. Councilor Litz.
A lot of these things, you know, are just maintenance that you do on an aging building. And I mean, we have one choice, you know, either to keep up with the building in a structural fashion and keeping the air and the water and all those sort of things on the inside of it, or else shutting it down. I mean, those are, you know, it's going to be substandard here in a couple of more years in a number of ways. So, I mean, those are real. That's the reality of our two choices here. And the hard one is how to pay for it.
Any other thoughts on this topic? And we'll move on to a couple more topics today. Okay, thank you, guys. Our next item on our agenda is our monthly city financial report from our Director of Finance, Gene Rohenhorst. And thank you, arena people, and thank you, Susan Scott, who I know works hard on the arena board. So thank you for being with us. Thanks, Russ.
Gene Rohenhorst, Director of Finance for the City of Sioux Falls. A couple of things, and we'll follow exactly the order it's on the agenda. First, you should have received an electronic copy of a document that looks like this, and if you didn't get that, you should have gotten a hard copy in your mailbox. It's just kind of a handy little piece of paper to have around or have with you. I suggested carrying it around your briefcase. It's at a very macro level, but it's got some good information on it. It can answer some high-level questions. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the financial statements, and then we'll go into the results of the RFP that we ran for the bond anticipation notes. This time we're starting to look a little bit in the financial statements about what year-end is going to look like, and that's really what this letter tries to give you. I won't go into a lot of detail on it. I'll cover a couple of the high points. If you've got any questions about anything specific, I'd be glad to try and answer them for you. I guess the good news is it looks like things are coming along pretty well. First thing, our property taxes, if you look at the ratios for the cash balances and that we're supposed to be keeping, we're running a little low, but that's due to we're not getting our sales tax or our property tax until the 1st of November, and we'll actually see that, or the 1st of December is when we'll actually see the money, somewhere in that time frame. But that should come in okay. Sales tax, notwithstanding, when you see the reports, it says we're only up 6.5% and our budget is 7%. We started from a much higher base, so to get the actual dollars as opposed to percentages for 07, we only need to increase 6.2% over 06. So we're going to get the actual dollars, whether we end up with a 7% or not. The good news is it still seems to be trending, when you look at it over a 3, 4, 5 year period of time, at around that 7% growth rate. Seems to be pretty good. in intergovernmental, I wanted to draw to your attention there the $1 million that we've already received. That is more than we'd anticipated. It's more than we had in the budget. That came from the State Department of Revenue. They will not tell us what created it or who it came from, which is not, they won't disclose who it came from, but they did not tell us what really created it, but they did tell us that it's a one-time event. So that if we hadn't had that one-time event, we'd be right on budget at this point in time. And the other one that draw your attention to, probably the most important, or not most important, but one of the most important ones, again, is investments are going our way. We've had minimal impact when interest rates went up a little bit, and now with Bernanke cutting rates by 50 basis points a couple of months ago, and with the good possibility that he's going to cut them another 50 basis points, we should be just fine with our investments. In fact, we'll probably come out a little bit better than we budgeted on our results for the year. So, all in all, it's looking pretty good at this point. We still have the same issues that I've always shared with you about. We don't have a budget on a monthly basis, so it's kind of iffy, but the trends look right. We can see the numbers. We can see a scenario that will get us to a balanced budget without any significant issues. Indeed, we may do a little better in a balanced budget and hopefully run a little bit of a surplus. So with that, if there's any other specific questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Councilor Costello?
Gene, at your municipal league meeting up in Aberdeen, you were looking to get some insight from the state officials on how our cash flow from the state sales tax works and the timing of that. Did you get anywhere with them on that?
We were not successful in that endeavor. We tried. There's going to be some meetings, I think, here in Sioux Falls that it looks like we're going to do that. Because one thing we did learn is we're not alone. Although we tend to have the biggest hits, other municipalities are experiencing the same kind of activity. So there was a meeting in Aberdeen, but like I say, we were not successful, at least in Aberdeen, in getting a good answer to that question.
Any other, Councilor Benica?
Gene, do you have some, or can you get us some historical data that would show in the last quarter of every fiscal year what kind of revenue percentages that we receive? Instead of getting the 25% revenue, which is typical, there's times that rides the roller coaster. And if we can get some idea what kind of revenue.
Are you talking about all revenue?
Generally
property
speaking,
tax,
yes.
sales tax?
If you could boil that down into the specific categories.
We can do that.
To give us some historical perspective.
It'll probably take us a day or two to dig
no
it
hurry.
out.
No hurry. Thank you.
One good thing I have noted since I've been here about the city is we do have data. It may not be in good shape, but we do have data.
Any other questions or comments for our finance director?
Madam Chair, I'd like to go over the bond anticipation
Okay.
note, that if there's any questions on that.
All right.
This is for the bond anticipation notes and the special assessment bonds for the collector streets that Public Works is planning on constructing next summer. We did a little mini RFP. We actually put it out on the internet for 2 weeks. I only heard of one call that I actually got as a result of the internet. It didn't go anywhere. We had, I think, something like a half a dozen hits, so somebody was looking at it on the internet. I hand-delivered the RFP to Wells Fargo, First Premier, U.S. Bank, and First National. First National did not respond. They had no interest in it. It wasn't compatible with their portfolio, either in the trust department or in the bank itself. And the other ones you got in front of you as far as how they compared. And Wells Fargo appears to be the best. We didn't really anticipate necessarily going with the lowest interest rate. It was going to depend on how the structure came about, but the Wells Fargo both had a structure that works well, and the interest rate was obviously very competitive. Now, one of the things that we're going to do differently with Wells Fargo, if you note, their rate for the special assessment bonds was going to float to an index. We are not going to do that. We're not interested in taking interest rate exposure for something like 15 months. So it appears that the interest rate, when you look at the floating rate deal, they had 4.64%. We're going to do a rate of probably 4.80 to 4.85, and the rate will be fixed. So we will have it locked in place in the next couple of weeks for the rate that we will use on December 31 of '08 to pay off the bond anticipation notes. Cost us a little bit more in interest in pricing, but I think it's probably wiser for us to stay out of the business of taking a chance on what interest rates are going to do, notwithstanding there's probably a pretty good chance they're going to stay down there, but you just don't like the idea of having something float out there like that. We want that locked in now. So any questions on that I could answer? Thank you very much.
You did such a good job. There are no questions, so thank you for being with us. And our last item on our agenda tonight will be just a bit more of a discussion on recycling. You know, one of my favorite topics, as you well know. And again, we do not have a proposal, in front of us right now on changing any of the current recycling policy, but just lots of discussion in our community. And I know that Councilor Brown and I, a while back, toured, not that long ago actually, toured Advanced Recycling Systems, owned by Lori Cressman and her husband. And anyway, and some of the rest of you may have done that also recently. But anyway, Lori had contacted some of the other councilors, and Councilor Litz has asked us to go forward with just a brief discussion on just the topic of recycling glass in our community, and we'll take some input from others in the audience too. But Lori, would you come forward, please? And thank you for your patience. You've hung in there a long time here. You could become a city councilor. I can tell that.
Well, hopefully you still have time for me, because I can reschedule if it's been too late of an evening. So
we have plenty of time for you.
Okay. My name is Lori Cressman. I'm with Advanced Recycling Systems, and I'm here, like you said, to discuss the glass recycling. And I guess even if it's on a voluntary basis, that we do the right thing and recycle properly. And I guess I'm hoping that everybody received the packets that I put in your mail with the information that I have received in letters and emails from different paper mills and comments that they have and their concerns. And in the process of this, also this last weekend or this last week, I received quite a huge letter from Weyerhaeuser, who is also another large paper user, and their concerns with glass in the paper products. And I spoke with Peter Grogan, and everybody that I spoke with said that please feel free to give out my name, and anybody that has questions and would like to talk about these items, they feel free to call them. But I spoke with Pete Grogan, and they actually have a video that they have that Weyerhaeuser has put together with their concerns and the problems that they have with glass being mixed in with the paper products. And he was telling me that each year, just their newspaper facility sends to their landfill $1 million worth of aluminum, plastic, and glass bottles that are sent to their facility, and it is recyclable material, but it's baled in with their paper products. And so these materials are not being recycled because they don't recycle those products. They are being sent to the landfill. And so he is in the process of sending me this video, but again, that just happened over the weekend, so I do not have this video in hand. And I think some of the concerns with the glass recycling, like especially the companies that do the newspaper and the cardboard is the wear and tear on their equipment and how costly it is. But with the office paper, their concern is, of course, the damage it does to their equipment, but the contamination it does to the end product that they make. And one of them is Georgia Pacific, who is a very large user of the paper. And there was a little newspaper article on there, their concerns with the glass contamination and the glass shards. It's impossible to keep those glass shards out, and they make products like paper towels, Kleenexes, toilet paper, diapers, etc. So it's very important that the glass be kept out of these paper materials. I spoke with Paul Dunn. He's in the Public Works. He is a recycling coordinator out of Omaha. And they, of course, Omaha isn't like us, but they do a curbside pickup, and they were source separating the curbside pickup, and they picked up glass in their recycling program. And they chose to go single stream, and this took effect in January 1st of 2006. And a couple months prior to this, they put out notice to the people that they were going to discontinue taking glass. When they decided to go single stream, the city decided to take glass out of that item. They decided they would put up drop areas for the residents to be able to drop their glass off, but they did not want to pick up the glass with the single stream recycling. And I asked Paul why they had come to this decision, and his comments were the mills and their problems that they have with the glass being mixed with the paper products. And, Weyerhaeuser was a huge advocate of keeping the glass out, and many of the other mills again. And their main concern is that they wanted to have an end product that was marketable. And they were also told by some of the different people that their end material goes to that they would get a better price. If their material went up for bid, they would bid on a better price. Another thing is when the markets are very aggressive and the paper is needed, it's easier to move this material. But when the market starts slowing down, it can be very hard to move some of this material. And the mills, they just start, they'll reject loads easier than what they normally do, and they just flat out won't take some of the material. So those are some of the comments that I have found and with the paper mills. And I've done some checking also with the glass facilities. And there are 3 main facilities here in the central part of the United States. And I'm sure that, I know that Dee knows several years ago, 10 years ago, I'm not sure if any of the other council members remember, but we did try, and it was a mandatory item. And still in the central United States, it is tough to find markets. There are markets out there, but it is tough and it is expensive. And there's 3 basically here, and one is Anchor Glass, which is by Minneapolis, Minnesota. One is Mid-America Glass, which is out of Des Moines. And I spoke with this gentleman, and they actually have a single-stream unit there at Des Moines. I spoke with Mick Berry out of Des Moines, and they have a $9 million single-stream unit. And he basically stated that glass in the single-stream is a nightmare. And they have the single-stream unit there. And he says glass definitely sends more material to the landfill. And single-stream glass is, even the glass itself, is more contaminated going through the single-stream unit. So not only does glass contaminate other products, but the glass that comes to them from a single-stream unit is also more contaminated. And he says it has to go through more processing when it comes through a single-stream unit. And basically, this facility, they will not take, you can either send your glass, which is glass bottles only, and it comes in clear, green, or brown. Those are the items that they take. And this facility will not take the separated glass if it comes from a single stream unit. They will only allow it to be mixed together, which of course there's absolutely no value on that when it's mixed together. And then I spoke also with Tom Reek. He is out of Wisconsin. That is the third facility that is close in the central part of the United States. And his company is Container Recycle Alliance out of Wisconsin, and he was president of that company for 3 years, and then he partnered with Waste Management Recycle America and was promoted to finance director there. And he basically stated the same thing, that glass coming from a single stream facility is very contaminated. And they have spent anywhere from $2 to $5 million on their equipment, and this is an ongoing type thing to keep their equipment up and running. And he also said that the single stream material needs to go through another sort line, so it needs to be handled more. And so I guess what I'm here about is, you know, to recycle glass, if this is something that we choose to do, and even if it is not a mandatory thing but a voluntary thing, we need to make sure that what we're doing it properly, and that the material is getting recycled, whether it's paper, whether it's glass, whether it's the plastic or the aluminums, and it's not getting diverted to the landfill. Even if it's not our landfill, somebody else's landfill. So I am not a negative person about recycling glass, but I want to make sure that if it's a program that we are going to do, even if it's that somebody wants to do it on a voluntary basis, that we make sure that it's being done properly. And so I guess that's kind of where I leave off at. Maybe one other item is the R.W. Beck report, and I was going to take out a copy and make you copies, but that was done in 2006, the R.W. Beck report. Does anybody remember seeing that? They did they were out at the landfill and sorted through all the trash and did a report on the recycling, you know, that they felt was coming into the landfill. And in that report, you know, it states there was 30% of paper products that were coming out to the landfill. And these are items, and out of that 30%, I looked at the listing of items that we actually, the city mandates that they don't go into the landfill. And out of that 30%, in actuality, it was about 21 to 22% that are materials that are mandated not to go. Some of it was other paper products that are not a mandatory item. And the same way with the plastics. That was 15%, and I looked at that in the plastics 1 and 2, which are the mandatory. That was, it stated 15%, but in actuality it was about 3.5%. And then the glass that comes out to the landfill, that stated 3%. And the clear glass and the colored glass, that comes to about 1.35%. And so, you know, the volumes coming out to the landfill, the materials that are already mandatory, you know, that are not to go out to the landfill, I really think it's important that we spend our time promoting and educating and making sure that those items are getting out of the landfill. So I guess that's kind of everything that I have to say. If anybody has any questions or comments.
Any questions or comments, councilors, on this topic? Okay. Thank you, Lori, for being here. And I don't know, Public Works, I don't know if you have anything to say, glass recycling here before we call it a day or not. So. Oh, sorry, Gerald, did I miss your question? Okay, sorry.
Good afternoon, Kevin Smith with the Office of Public Works. I will keep my comments brief in the interest of time. If you look through the current city ordinances, glass is not listed along with the other mandatory materials that need to be recycled. That being said, I think the city is committed to keeping all materials out of the landfill, whether they're banned or not. And this issue certainly needs to go in front of the Solid Waste Planning Board for their thoughts on it as well, that by whichever method or methods we keep recyclables out of the landfill, I think we should pursue them. And I'm not in a position to say whether either our department or the board would support the mandatory ban of glass from the landfill, but we're just as interested as everyone else to see what gains we can make in recycling. And I'm not knowledgeable myself personally to say one method is better than another, but we just would like to support anything to keep material out of the landfill.
Gerald, will you go ahead with your question?
Maybe, Kevin, you can answer this, but Lori referred to the R.W. Beck study. I don't ever remember seeing that. It doesn't mean that we didn't see it. I could have forgotten it. But is there any way that we can get an executive summary of what that report says?
Yes.
The other thing that I'd like to do was to have this maybe deferred to one of the committees and have some research done on recycling by both the committee and certainly by the clerk's office, because I found going out to Lori's plant being very educational, and I think that obviously the city needs to make this one of its priorities in the future, is to look at their whole recycling process. So I hope that we can refer this and get this on some committee's agenda to get this show on the road.
Okay, it's right. I'll just make a decision right now. Like in the past, we have referred the recycling topic to Public Works, and so why don't I just refer it right now to Public Works as far as just, recycling in general, particularly, the topic of glass recycling, and of course, we will work closely with the Solid Waste Board on all of this. Would that be okay with the rest of you? Is that fine? Fine? Okay. Or public services, what did I call it? I'm a little tired. Sorry. Public services. I've been here too long today. Sorry about that. Councilor Costello.
I just have one question for Lori. The 2 points I think you were trying to make was, one is that we have a lot more opportunity, the report, the study that you had mentioned earlier, and that we have a lot more opportunity in recycling the things that we should already be recycling versus glass. But, whatever means we use to recycle glass, if a paper company or whoever that buys the recycled product, isn't it ultimately their decision to whether or not to buy it? And if there is unacceptable levels of glass, won't they reject it and no longer continue to buy from that vendor who is trying to sell it? And can't we let the market take care of the problem?
That is correct. And it is up to the mill, and if there is too much contamination in it. And, this happened to us. It wasn't on the glass level. It was on a different material. And this was a mandatory item. And back at this time, and this was approximately 10 years ago, it was called a res mix. They called it a residential mix. And this material was newspapers, office paper, cardboard, chipboard, like the breakfast food boxes. All those items were thrown together. And there was a market for that for quite some time. I don't remember how long we did this, but we marketed it that way. We also kept, like the newspaper separate. We had those market materials also. But at one point, there was no what I'm saying is they took this material, the mills took this material, all of a sudden they could not move this material. And they discontinued taking it. And one of the recycling facilities, who is no longer in business at this time, they refused to take it. The haulers did not have any place to bring this material. Advanced Recycling continued to take this material, and then we worked with the city, and it is an item that they discontinued. It was no longer on the mandatory list, but Advanced Recycling had like 20 trailers stored up of this material that we could not move, and it was like a $40,000 cost by the time we got rid of this material. And so, this is just something I don't want to happen again. Yes, this material can move, and yes, it is up to the mills to reject it or not reject it, and they will take it up to a certain point. But when there is such an overwhelming amount of materials, and we go through those cycles where newspaper, of course they want the newspaper now because it's used for insulation. In the summertime it really dries up kind of. And, the different materials have different times when they really need the materials or they don't. And also when China starts buying up a lot of the material, then they get very hungry. So, there are different times when when the markets, they will accept these materials. And then there are other times, and it can come back, even if it isn't, the city's responsibility. That one did come back, and kind of bite everybody. And so that was a material that we discontinued taking at that time because there just weren't markets for it. And that's just what concerns me with this is, but I mean, you hear so much from so many of the mills that it concerns me to go ahead and say, let's do this, and then have it come back. And I know Dee believes in free enterprise, and as it should be, but we just need to make sure that it's handled properly, and we don't take one step backwards or forwards and two steps backwards, and the contamination that it causes. And this is about keeping material out of the landfill. And if you're causing so much contamination in other materials that there's such a large percentage going back out to the landfill, is that what we really consider recycling and proper recycling?
I guess, Lori, along same lines as Pat just said, I really do, I'm just speaking for myself, not the other councilors, I really do believe that the free enterprise system will take care of the, the market situation and also contamination problems that are out there. So those concerns are not high on my list. And I would say, and I've said this to you before when I've visited with you, in the 5.5 years I've been on the city council, the question I am asked the most frequently on recycling is, Dee, how come how come the city is not taking glass? And so, anyway, just all an interesting discussion. We appreciate you being here today, and thank you for your patience waiting so long for us. And thank you, Public Works folks, for being here too. And we're going to adjourn for today unless you have anything else, councilors.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.